Warhawk was the United States' biggest competitor on the global stage. Due to a lack of evidence, both sides had yet to completely fall out with each other. But now, a member of the Robinson family had died within the country's borders. This was a serious matter, and it couldn't be taken lightly. If there were survivors, the U.S. could have used their trespassing to confront Warhawk publicly, because trespassing on another country's territory without permission was taboo. Even if Warhawk was the #1 country in the world, it would have put them in a difficult position if they were condemned by the people. But everyone on the plane had been killed, and it didn't look like an accident. The public would turn on the U.S. instead of Warhawk. "Why would their plane be here?" Tyrell asked. "This is our country's territory. Have you confirmed the identity of the deceased?" "Yes. One of them is Adler Robinson," the Leviathan unit member replied. "Seal the area immediately. I'll inform the Leviathan unit." Tyrell turned on the encrypted communication devices that the unit had distributed to the Empyrean Circle's members. The leader of the Leviathan unit's voice sounded from the device. "What's the matter?" "I'm patrolling the jungle near the border and found several corpses in plane wreckage. They don't seem to have died from the crash. They were killed by one person." "What else?" the leader asked. He knew this wasn't enough for Tyrell to contact him. With their skills and authority, they could handle most of the problems on their own. "We've confirmed that one of the deceased is a member of the Robinson family in Warhawk. His name is Adler Robinson." The leader's tone turned serious. If they didn't handle this situation properly, it could cause a conflict between their two countries. "How are you handling this situation?" "I've asked the Leviathan unit members under my command to seal off the area and keep this on the down low to prevent news from spreading," Tyrell replied. "Good work. Conduct an investigation and don't overlook a single detail," the leader instructed. "Make sure to arrest the culprit. Then send the remains of the deceased back to Warhawk. That's the only way we can resolve this without instigating an international conflict and protect our country's position." Tyrell acknowledged his orders and turned off the communication device. He instructed the Leviathan unit to carry out an extensive investigation. They had to catch the culprit. Tyrell didn't notice two masked men hiding some distance away. They were concealing their presence. One of them was wearing a white horse mask. His code name in Vindictus was Reeve. The other was wearing a Buddha mask, and his code name was Blaine. "Did you get all that, Blaine?" Reeve whispered. Blaine put his camera away. "I filmed everything. We just need to wait for an opportunity to get out of here." Reeve cast an annoyed glance at Tyrell and the Leviathan unit. "Is there a need to sneak around like this? We can just kill them all and leave." "Don't you remember what our boss said? If we make a scene, the U.S. will find out that Vindictus is making their move again. He wants us to stay hidden." "Then how are we going to get out? They're sealing off the area." "I have my ways." Blaine pulled 2 talismans out of his pocket with a cryptic smile. "This is our escape route." Reed was skeptical. He'd never seen anything like it. "What are we supposed to do with 2 pieces of paper?" "It's not just a piece of paper. It's an invisibility talisman produced by Devil Hall. It can distort reality. With our martial arts, we can walk out of the blockade without being detected." "Since when did they start producing things like this? It's like those magical artifacts in movies." "Devil Hall is a mysterious organization. We work with them, but we don't know much about them. I was going to investigate their organization, but our boss told me not to." Reeve was amazed. "I wonder what else they have." Blaine handed him a talisman. "All right, we can talk about Devil Hall later. Let's get out of here first." "How does this thing work?" "Infuse your inner energy into it." The talismans glowed, and Blaine and Reeve disappeared. Reeve held out his hand in front of his face, but he didn't see anything there. "This is amazing." "They can't see us, but our physical body still exists," Blaine warned. "Don't get carried away and get us caught." The 2 of them quietly walked out of the blockade. When they were far enough to escape Tyrell's detection, they quickened their pace and ran away. Odin smiled when he saw the good news on the communicator. Gwen and Luther were beside him and noticed the changes in his expression. "Did Reeve and Blaine succeed?" Gwen asked. Odin placed the communicator on the table. "Yes, but that's to be expected. They're invincible if they're together. Unless the Sovereign intercepts them or if Vito comes back to life, no one can get in their way." "In that case, isn't it time for us to begin our operation?" Luther asked. "Not yet. We need to wait for the right time. The U.S. will definitely keep the news under wraps. They won't make an official statement until the culprit is caught. They'll be holding a diplomatic meeting soon. Before that, we'll inform the Robinson family of Adler's death and release the video. The international media will spread the news, and the Empyrean Circle's prestige will plummet. That will be our opportunity to face the Leviathan unit." The next day, the Robinson family announced that one of their members, Adler Robinson, had made a trip to the U.S. a few days ago, but they'd lost contact with him. The family requested that U.S. officials investigate his whereabouts. The Leviathan unit was deeply concerned. Adler was already dead, and his remains were still in the forest. He didn't have much authority in Warhawk, but he did have a prestigious status, and his influence was extraordinary. If he died overseas, it would cause a huge commotion in Warhawk and instigate public opinion on the international community. However, they hadn't caught the culprit, so they couldn't tell the Robinson family the truth yet. The U.S. officials stepped forward to placate the Robinson family and stated that they would search for Adler. After much difficulty in appeasing them, a video began to circulate the overseas network a few days later. In the video, a young man in a white uniform was standing among a pile of bodies, chatting with his subordinates. The young man then lifted Adler's body and made a gesture that appeared to be him tossing aside the body. The video cut off at that point. The title was especially shocking. Tyrell Fallon, a member of the Empyrean Circle, killed Adler Robinson. The international media outlets spread the video far and wide, and pressure from the public pushed the U.S. to the brink of collapse. At the Leviathan unit's headquarters in Annapolis, the leader of the unit was standing with his hands behind his back at the head of the table. He was facing the window, but his anger was evident from the tension in the room. Who leaked the news? The higher-ups stared at each other accusingly. There had been a serious oversight at a crucial moment. Whoever was in charge of the investigation wouldn't be able to get out of this unscathed. One of the higher-ups swallowed hard before gathering his courage and responding to the furious leader. "Our priority should be coming up with a way to lessen the impact." "I know that," the leader snapped. "But how are we going to do that?" "We could hand Tyrell over to the Robinson family and crush Warhawk's scheme in one move," one of the higher-ups suggested. Another higher-up retorted, "What are you talking about? Tyrell is a member of the Empyrean Circle. He's taken over the Sovereign's responsibilities." "If we hand one over, we'll still have 9 left," the first higher-up said. "Can't we find someone else to take his place?" The debate intensified and gradually evolved into an argument. The leader turned around and silenced everyone with a glare. "I don't want to hear any of you mention this again. Have you forgotten what happened with Mr. Adams before he left? Trust goes both ways. We can't give up on one of our own. Is there no other solution?" "No, there's no other way," a higher-up replied. "Warhawk is pressuring us internationally, and the other countries are using their forces to provoke us." The leader made up his mind. Then there's only one option. To protect Tyrell and deal with the pressure from the international public, we'll have to go along with their unreasonable requests. The higher-ups tried to dissuade him. Back when the U.S. was at war with the Alliance, they had been forced to sign many unfair treaties to protect their territory and the people. The civilians suffered greatly until Stephen appeared and helped them make a comeback. If they gave in to the enemy's unreasonable requests, it would be a repeat of what happened back then. The leader was firm and stood by his decision. "I'll take responsibility. The Empyrean Circle trusts us and believes in us. We can't let them down. We lost the Sovereign because we were short-sighted and too arrogant. We have to protect him." The leader looked at everyone in the room, as if daring them to argue. Half of the higher-ups averted their gaze. They were ashamed that they had suggested handing Tyrell over. The video caused a huge sensation in the world across the ocean. The United States' status had been steadily rising since the Commander-in-Chief's appearance, and it had soared when the sovereign was appointed. Not long ago, the Empyrean Circle had appeared out of nowhere a year after the sovereign resolved a national crisis. The country's international status had risen to a level where it could compete with Warhawk. But they suddenly had a scandal, and it involved a member of the Empyrean Circle. The media outlet sensed the incoming groundbreaking news and headed to the U.S. for an explanation. While the country was at a loss, the Leviathan unit transferred Tyrell away from the border and sent their people to investigate. Tyrell was temporarily imprisoned. He sat on the floor of the cell, blaming himself for his incompetence. He was the reason the country had been humiliated internationally. He remembered Stephen's words during their last training together. "Tyrell, you have to remember that the hostile forces overseas are far more sinister and cunning than you think. They caught me off guard more than once. When you encounter any situations that involve foreign countries, you have to be careful and take every possibility into account." At that time, Tyrell had answered confidently, "With you as the sovereign and the Empyrean Circle's existence, no organization overseas would dare to provoke our country." Stephen had sighed and shaken his head at his response. Having been locked up in the cell, Tyrell now understood what Stephen had been trying to tell him. He'd been overconfident and fallen into a trap. Tyrell leaned back against the wall and closed his eyes. If Stephen were here, what would he do? How would he get out of this predicament? Odin used his identity as Adler's subordinate to gain the Robinson family's trust. At this time, he was heading to the U.S. on a private jet with the family. Adler's father, Brent Robinson, was yelling at his subordinates. "You good-for-nothings! Why didn't anyone report to me when my son went to the United States?" His furious voice echoed in the cabin. No one dared to speak. His subordinate stared at the floor as he vented his anger. Brent's fury grew when no one responded. "Why isn't anyone saying anything? I'm asking you a question. Why didn't you report it to me? Are you ignoring your employer?" One of his subordinates mustered up his courage and said, "No, we wouldn't dare." "Then why aren't you answering me?" The subordinate who responded was too afraid to make a sound. "You don't want to answer? Fine." Brent waved his bodyguards over. "Someone toss him out." The subordinate pleaded for Brent to spare his life, earning looks of pity from the Vindictus members. Brent ignored him. His bodyguards stepped forward, grabbed the subordinate, and dragged him toward the hatch. He screamed as he was tossed out, and then there was nothing. Brent collapsed onto the seat nearby and closed his eyes. The Vindictus members noticed how he'd calmed down and took the chance to talk to him. Odin, who was dressed in a suit, came forward and asked to speak with him. Brent waved his hand, signaling for his bodyguards to bring him over. Odin followed the bodyguards and greeted him respectfully. Brent opened his eyes. His anger had been replaced by sorrow. "What is it?" "We know what happened to your son. We are his subordinates, after all." Brent brightened and sat up. "What do you know?" Unlike Adler, Brent possessed far more authority. He had influence over Warhawk, and he held the power of the military in his hands. When news of Adler's disappearance came to light, Brent didn't immediately contact the U.S. officials. Instead, he let his family do the work for him, because he was preoccupied with his own matters. He was confident that no one would provoke a member of the Robinson family, so he didn't think anything serious had happened to Adler. When Brent found out that Adler had died in a foreign land, he'd flown into a rage. He set aside his work and contacted the U.S. officials, demanding a diplomatic meeting with them. During the meeting, Brent threatened them. "If the U.S. doesn't give me a satisfactory explanation, then be prepared for a conflict with Warhawk." His words caused panic to ensue around the world. Warhawk was ranked the #1 country in the world. They possessed cutting-edge technology, and their military was top-notch. They also had a squadron stationed at sea. After the war with the Alliance, the U.S. had secured its ranking on the global stage with the appearance of the Sovereign and the Empyrean Circle. They also had a miracle drug, golden sage salve, and various martial arts to their advantage. Their overall strength was on par with Warhawk's. As things stood, Warhawk was ranked first, while the U.S. was ranked second. But there was friction between the top two countries. An influential figure from Warhawk announcing they didn't mind resorting to a large-scale war was enough to spark waves of fear around the world. The smaller countries were afraid that they would be drawn into the conflict. The friction between the two colossi, even if it was just the aftermath, was not something they could handle. The U.S. was powerful, but because Adler had died on their territory and news of his death had been spread before they could make an official statement, they were at a disadvantage. To make matters worse, the video was evidence of Adler's death. They couldn't refute Brent's accusations. Rumors circulated that the reason why the U.S. hadn't directly responded to the threats was because they were afraid of Warhawk. The rumors gradually spiraled out of control, and the U.S. international status began to drop rapidly. Before Mr. Adler went to the States, he and I had a discussion, Odin explained. At that time, I didn't think too much of it, but in hindsight, there was something off. When he paused, Brent prompted him to continue. Odin had caught his attention, so he had repeated the speech he'd prepared beforehand. Mr. Adler told me that if his trip to the States was successful, he'd find out the truth behind the Sovereign's identity. Looking back, it was a bit odd. He's not a reckless person. He wouldn't set foot in enemy territory to investigate personally. If anything, he would go there to confirm information he already had. As for the Sovereign's identity, it's not just us who doesn't know who he is. I heard that even the Commander-in-Chief, Kylan Gale, doesn't know who he is either. There's only a handful of people in the U.S. who are aware. Brent nodded, seemingly understanding where Odin was going with this. The answer is obvious, Odin continued. The only people who know his true identity are the core officials of the U.S. The most likely suspects are the Leviathan Unit or the Empyrean Circle. Tyrell Fallon is a member of the Circle. He has to be a culprit. Tyrell Fallon, Brent repeated in disgust. I'll make him pay with his life. Odin suppressed a laugh. If Brent discovered that the real murderer was standing right in front of him, what would he think? Tyrell is the culprit, but what if he's not the real mastermind? Brent gave him a confused look. What do you mean by that? Odin calmly picked up a cup of coffee, took a sip, and said, Think about this carefully. Tyrell is a member of the Empyrean Circle. Would he really risk his position to harm a citizen of Warhawk? Does he have what it takes to take on our two countries' diplomatic conflict and the United States' tarnished reputation? Brent thought it over. That's true. He doesn't have the required authority nor the influence. Odin went on when he took the bait. After the incident was exposed, the U.S. didn't hand Tyrell over to your family to appease the public. They're clearly trying to protect him. The only conclusion we can draw from this is that the higher-ups of the Leviathan unit planned this meticulous scheme and had Tyrell execute it. What you're saying is, the U.S. plotted against us? Yes, they hid Mr. Adler's death from us. If it weren't for the video, we wouldn't have known about it. Brent slammed his fist on the armrest. Damn it, is there nothing we can do? Will I have to watch the murderer get away with killing my son? He had threatened to go to war with the U.S. during the meeting, but that wasn't up to him. The Robinson family had a prominent status in Warhawk, but they had internal disputes like every other upper-class family. Adler's status wasn't high enough for the country to go to war over his death. If the U.S. offered a negotiation that contained sufficient benefits, the family would accept without hesitation. Adler's death would then be covered up. I have a way to get justice for your son, Odin said with a smile. Brent looked at them doubtfully. What can you do? Even if he couldn't do anything, what could his son's subordinate possibly accomplish? Vindictus is not an all-powerful organization, but we have been in the U.S. for a long time, Odin explained. The U.S. values etiquette and honor. If they're in the right, they won't yield no matter how much we pressure them. If they're in the wrong, they will have a hard time moving forward with their stance. We can make them use their code of honor. His suggestion piqued Brent's interest. No wonder Adler had trusted Odin so much and told him about his plans to find out the sovereign's identity. Odin was intelligent and capable. Continue. With Brent's approval, Odin went on. When the time comes, let go of your reputation and demand for the U.S. to hand over the murderer. You are a father who lost his son. Make this clear when they question you. They're in the wrong, so they'll give in eventually. Brent hesitated. As a member of the Robinson family, reputation was as important as his own life. But when he thought about his son, he found himself wanting to agree with the suggestion. Odin could tell that he was conflicted, so he added, Your birthday's coming up, and Mr. Adler wanted to tell you the sovereign's identity as your present. Brent's heart clenched, and he made up his mind. Reputation means nothing if I can't get justice for my son. Odin pretended to be emotional. If Mr. Adler knew about this, he would be very touched. At the Leviathan Unit's headquarters, the leader of the unit made an announcement to the higher-ups. Warhawk is sending representatives to our country tomorrow. Brent Robinson will be leading the group. He's Adler Robinson's father, and he holds a prestigious position in Warhawk. How should we deal with him? The higher-ups were silent for a long time before one of them stood up. He was a representative of the warfare faction of the Leviathan Unit. Brent has stated that he doesn't mind going to war with the U.S. if it's necessary. We could strike first and hold him accountable for declaring war. Adler is his son. It's not that easy for him to get over his grief. It'll most likely spiral into a deep-seated hatred. We can't hand Tyrell over, so why not take action while we're ahead? What do you all think? Another higher-up stood up and retorted. For the past hundreds of years, we've made it a point to never take the initiative to attack another country. That hasn't changed for centuries. Brent hasn't taken action yet. He's only threatened us. We are at fault because Adler died on our territory. If we wage war, the world will be destroyed. The first higher-up scoffed. That is only a preventative measure. Brent has already expressed his hostility towards the U.S. What's wrong with us taking action? If we act first, we could make the international media shut their mouths. The second higher-up shot back. The warfare faction are indeed a bunch of brutes. Is there anything in that brain of yours besides fighting? His words triggered a wave of rebuttal. The argument intensified as insults were hurled across the room. The Leviathan Unit's leader felt a headache coming on. Be quiet. Arguing amongst yourselves is a waste of time. I understand the warfare faction's thoughts, but we can't be the first ones to take action. This is a principle that's been passed down in our country for hundreds of years. In terms of public opinion, we're currently at a disadvantage, so we can't risk any more negativity. The higher-ups of the Leviathan unit stopped their bickering and sat back down. What should we do? Send out a negotiation team to stall for time, the leader instructed. Release Tyrell. Have him lead an investigation team to search for the culprit behind Adler's death and prove his innocence. The higher-ups were hesitant. Brent is already upset because of his son's death. If we let Tyrell lead the investigation, wouldn't the situation get worse? It's better than nothing, the leader said. We don't have any better ideas. Should we report this to Mr. Adams? Someone asked. The leader considered it. No, he's already retired. Besides, he's the Grand Palace Master. He'll know about it even if we don't tell him. He assumed that Stephen already knew about what had happened. Since he hadn't made a move yet, it meant that he didn't want to get involved. However, the leader's speculations were incorrect. The Leviathan unit had stated that they would take over the investigation on Vindictus, so Stephen had let go of his responsibilities and left it to them. The palace was aware of this, and while they were in the know, they didn't report any of this information to him. Therefore, Stephen didn't know about the current predicament that the country was facing. The leader waved his hand dismissively. The meeting is adjourned. The higher-ups dispersed. Later that day, a member of the Leviathan unit went to pay Tyrell a visit. 2 armed soldiers were guarding the cell. They saluted the Leviathan unit member when they saw him. He nodded and held out a document. The Leviathan unit has decided to release Mr. Tyrell. They have a task for him. The soldier on the right stepped forward and examined the document as per the procedures. He verified its authenticity and informed the other soldier to let him pass. Tyrell sensed someone approaching and opened his eyes. The Leviathan unit's member went into the cell and read the document's contents out loud. Tyrell Fallon, member of the Empyrean Circle, did not exercise sufficient caution and was caught in a scheme devised by foreign forces, causing great losses to the U.S. Tyrell felt guiltier with every accusation. He had nothing to say to defend himself. If the higher-ups had decided to hand him over to Warhawk, he would have no complaints. Just as he was about to accept his fate, the Leviathan unit member said, "Therefore, the Leviathan unit has decided to temporarily restore your position and give you a chance to prove your innocence. Find the culprit behind Adler Robinson's death before the conclusion of the negotiations with Brent Robinson and the representatives from Warhawk." Tyrell's eyes widened. He was prepared to sacrifice himself for the country. He hadn't expected the higher-ups of the Leviathan unit to protect him and give him another chance. "Mr. Tyrell, do you have any objections?" Tyrell stood up, filled with determination. "No, I won't fail this mission." The Leviathan unit member seemed to have predicted this reaction and handed him the document along with his weapon and his uniform that they'd confiscated. "Mr. Tyrell, please set off immediately. Warhawk's representatives will reach the border soon." "Understood." After a long day at work, Kim was driving home. She'd hired a full-time driver, but she preferred to drive herself. As soon as she opened the door to the villa, she heard Stephen's voice coming from the kitchen. "Welcome home, Kim." He came to the door wearing an apron and carrying plates of dishes. Kim put her bag down and took off her blazer. "We hired a chef. You don't have to cook if you don't want to." "It's been a while since I prepared a meal for you. I made your favorites." Kim smiled. "I can't wait to try it." Valeria heard the noise and ran out of the bedroom. "Mommy, you're back!" Kim picked her up. She hadn't seen her daughter for an entire day. She'd missed her. "Did you behave while Mommy was at work?" Whenever Stephen was away for long periods of time, Kim had always taken Valeria with her to work. When he came back a year ago and spent more time at home, she'd handed the responsibility to him to give them an opportunity to get closer as father and daughter. Stephen placed the last dish on the table and took off his apron. "Dinner's ready." Kim set her daughter on the floor. "Valeria, tell Grandma to come downstairs for dinner." Valeria nodded enthusiastically and ran upstairs to get Victoria. When the four of them were seated at the dining table, Stephen urged them to try the dishes he'd prepared. He was confident they wouldn't be disappointed. Kim picked up her spoon and tasted the soup. "It's delicious." "I'm glad you like it." Stephen motioned for Victoria to try the dishes. "Mom, you should try it too." Victoria chuckled at his insistence and picked up her fork. "All right." After a hearty dinner, Stephen sat on the couch with Valeria and chatted with Kim. Valeria was playing with the remote and switched to the news channel. A reporter was delivering the evening news. "Representatives from Warhawk will be arriving in Annapolis at noon tomorrow. Mr. Tyrell Fallon is investigating the recent incident." "Our country was caught up in something complicated recently," Kim said. "Even the Wyvern Group's projects overseas were affected." Stephen gave her a questioning look. "What happened?" His question made Kim think about his past identity as a soldier. The country was in a crisis, and his first reaction was to ask about the details. "Do you remember Adler Robinson, the man who rallied 2 million martial artists to target the sovereign at Cadiz? He was found dead near our borders recently. The countries overseas claim that Tyrell killed him because of what he did to the sovereign. They uploaded a video as evidence. The international public is criticizing our country, and Warhawk has even threatened to start a war." That was enough information for Stephen to get a grasp on the recent events. This was obviously a scheme targeting the Empyrean Circle. Tyrell was Stephen's student, so he knew what kind of person he was. Tyrell would never do something like that. "I see. This is another conspiracy by the countries overseas." "Really? What about the video?" Kim asked. "The officials admitted that the person being filmed was Tyrell." Stephen didn't explain further. "Never mind, it's nothing." He'd retired from his position as the sovereign. These complicated matters had nothing to do with him anymore. He didn't want to get involved or risk endangering his family. He believed that the Leviathan unit and the Empyrean Circle were capable of handling the situation without him. Kim assumed Stephen was sensitive to national affairs because of his past in the military. He must be upset that he couldn't contribute to the country when they were in trouble. She decided to change the topic. The next day, a plane engraved with an intricate pattern landed in Annapolis's airport. It was a private jet from the Robinson family. The runway's security line was surrounded by guards. They were waiting for their distinguished guests. The stairs were lowered, and the cabin door opened. A middle-aged man in extravagant attire was the first to walk out. His subordinates were behind him. The guards stood at attention and saluted them. Their movements were uniform, as if they were carved from the same mold. The United States' highest-ranked diplomat, Preston, strode forward and shook hands to welcome them to the country. The guards were a team reserved to welcome the leaders of the countries. They had been sent to welcome Warhawk's representative to demonstrate the officials' sincerity. The middle-aged man, Brent Robinson, did not feel their sincerity. He scoffed and had no intention of shaking hands with Preston. The atmosphere turned awkward as Preston retracted his hand. Brent was giving them a hard time the moment he stepped off the plane. Preston was annoyed, but he plastered a smile on his face and acted like a spring breeze on the surface. The U.S. was at fault, after all. "You must be tired from your long journey. Please come with me. We've arranged a hotel for you to stay. We'll have our discussion tomorrow." Brent snorted. "I came for only one reason, to avenge my son." After a pause, he added, "I'm a father, and I have to seek justice for him." Preston felt a headache coming on. Every time he received foreign guests, what he feared the most was meeting guests like Brent, who didn't care about the relationship between two countries and prioritized their personal feelings. They didn't care about the effect on the country's international status, nor did they consider the potential for conflict. Warhawk's position gave them the authority to ignore these issues, but the same couldn't be said for the United States. The U.S. hasn't been highly ranked for long. Their strength was evident, but their international status wasn't stable. Unlike Warhawk, they had to pay attention to everything they did, which caused certain people, like Brent, to take advantage of them. "We'll give you a satisfactory explanation," Preston said solemnly. "Please follow me." "I hope so." Brent and his subordinates left the airport with Preston and the guards. When they were finally in the car, heading to the 5-star hotel, Preston breathed a sigh of relief. He'd managed to placate Brent temporarily. The rest would be left up to the Leviathan unit. He hoped they had a plan for tomorrow. At the Leviathan unit's headquarters, the leader of the unit was reading a document detailing Preston and the guards' reception of Warhawk's representatives. The Leviathan unit had specialized intelligence personnel who were skilled at analyzing facial expressions. The document included their analysis of Brent's intentions based on how he acted and what he said. The leader was perplexed. "It seems like Brent Robinson really loves his son." "That kind of person is the most troublesome to deal with," one of the higher-ups said worriedly. Brent held a high position and relied on his country's strength. His international status was second to none. What made things even more complicated was that he wasn't here for a typical negotiation. There was something he wanted, and he wouldn't be leaving until he got it. The Leviathan unit had originally planned to conceal news of Adler's death and catch the culprit before making an official statement. But their plans were ruined when the video was exposed. Brent had taken an aggressive approach and boarded a plane to the U.S. the moment he received the news. The Leviathan unit was in a bind because of that video. They couldn't deny the accusations, so Brent had the upper hand. "The only thing we can do now is hope for the negotiation team to stall for as much time as possible while Tyrell investigates the culprit," another higher-up said. "Tyrell fell into their trap, which means we've also caught up in their scheme," one of the higher-ups complained. Everyone looked at him. They all knew that, but what was the point in saying that now? Another higher-up shook his head. "We were planning on catching the culprit to minimize the impact of the incident, but Brent Robinson isn't giving us time to investigate. I suggest we act according to our original plan and let Preston lead the negotiation team and buy time for us to send our people out to investigate. Let's do it that way then, the leader decided. The Leviathan unit moved out when they received the order. Preston had taken Warhawk's representatives to a 5-star hotel that was specifically used to receive foreign guests. The standards were high, and the guests held prestigious positions. The staff were professionals, and each of them had attained at least a PhD. They were proficient in several languages and could communicate fluently with guests from around the world. After Preston arranged rooms for Brent and his subordinates, he received a new mission from the Leviathan unit's leader, instructing him to lead the negotiation team. He had to stall for time, and the longer the better. Preston wanted to complain. It wouldn't be easy to pacify Brent. He had been dealing with him and his subordinates all day, and they were stubborn. He didn't feel optimistic about the negotiations tomorrow. But the Leviathan unit's orders had already been issued, and he could only carry them out. If he didn't, his position as the highest-ranked diplomat would probably be given to someone else the next day. After Brent and his subordinates checked into the hotel's luxurious presidential suite, they gathered around a table to chat. Brent's bitter expression was replaced with a smile. "What'd you think of my performance?" "It was convincing," Odin replied. "It was a perfect act. They probably think you're angry that your son was killed. They wouldn't know our true motive." "You're wrong. I loved my son when he was alive, but he's passed away. Those left behind have to continue with their lives. The living is more important than the dead. I was planning to pass on everything I have to my son, but now that he's dead, I have to make use of his death." Brent's words deepened Odin's understanding of him. He was a dangerous person. On the plane, Brent had been grieving over Adler's death, but not even a day later, he'd already moved forward and used the incident to his advantage. "They want to negotiate with us tomorrow," Brent said. "What do you think they're doing in the meantime?" "They'll analyze your performance today and come to the conclusion that you're aggrieved over your son's death. They'll think the only thing you want is for them to hand Tyrell over. They don't want to do that, so they're stalling for time." Brent frowned. That wasn't what he'd expected. "Shouldn't they compensate me?" To the U.S., sincerity doesn't come in the form of material compensation. They'll compensate you in other ways. Brent didn't push the topic. He was a citizen of Warhawk. He didn't understand the mindset of foreigners. "Then how should I push them for compensation?" "It's simple. We'll use the same tactic and stall for time," Odin explained. "The longer we wait, the guiltier they'll feel. They'll give us better compensation when the time comes. But we can't drag it out for too long or else they'll think you're not taking this seriously." "How many days should we delay for?" "At most 3 days. I'm sure they'll want that as well." "Okay, I'll go along with your suggestion." "Thank you. I'll be leaving first." "Where are you going?" Brent asked suspiciously. Mr. Adler made arrangements in Annapolis before he passed away. "As his subordinate, I have to wrap up any loose ends." Brent lost interest and turned away. "Go ahead." Odin left the room and rounded the corner. He turned on his communicator and contacted his subordinate. "I've followed Brent to the hotel. How are things going over there?" "We found a person close to Tyrell, but she's an aristocrat, so it's hard for us to make a move." "Which family is she from?" "The Chevalier family." "Okay, leave that to Reeve and Blaine," Odin instructed. "You and Gwen have something else to do. We made arrangements in Annapolis some time ago. It's time to make use of it." Luther was hesitant. "Are you sure? If we're not careful, we'll be implicated too." "I've already made up my mind. We have to go to such lengths if we want to shake the country's foundation." Luther had his doubts, but he could only agree. "What did he say?" Gwen asked when the call ended. "He wants to make use of our preparations in Annapolis," Luther replied. "What? Did you try to talk him out of it?" "Of course I did, but he's already made up his mind. What else can I do?" The two of them fell silent. After a moment, Luther spoke up. "Whatever. If it goes south, we'll find somewhere to hide." Gwen sighed. "I hope it doesn't come to that. So who's going to deal with Lana Chevalier?" He wants us to leave that to Reeve and Blaine. All right, hurry up and inform them. I'll send them the information. At this time, Tyrell was having a meeting with the head of the Fallon family, Wayne. Tyrell, this is your chance to clear your name, Wayne said. Calm down and don't fall into the enemy's trap again. I understand. All right, you can get back to your work. Tyrell didn't leave. He hesitated before saying, I'd like to ask my teacher for his advice. When Stephen was the Sovereign, he'd been framed more than once, but he'd cleared his name every time. Tyrell was now in the same boat. If anyone could give him advice, it was Stephen. Wayne was naturally aware of who Tyrell's teacher was, but he couldn't let him meet him. Stephen was retired from his position as the Sovereign, and he was now living a peaceful and ordinary life with his family. It hadn't been easy to achieve. Mr. Adams is retired. He doesn't want to be involved in this country's affairs anymore. I'm not going to see him as a member of the Fallon family, Tyrell said. I'll be visiting him as a student. I wanted to ask him how to handle this predicament. Wayne was conflicted. He was quiet for a long time before he let out a sigh. I'll pretend I never heard that. This is your own decision. Tyrell knew that it was a subtle approval. Thank you, Mr. Wayne. Wayne watched him leave with another sigh. Tyrell was one of the most outstanding members of the family. He couldn't let his career be ruined by a conspiracy. But Stephen was the aristocrat's leader, and Wayne was his subordinate. He was caught in the middle, and he didn't know if he had made the right decision. He could only hope that Tyrell's visit wouldn't upset Stephen. When Tyrell left the Fallon family's residence, a woman ran into his arms. I was so worried about you. He wrapped his arms around her and caressed her hair. I'm fine, Lana. I'm sorry I made you worry. Lana Chevalier was Tyrell's childhood friend and his fiancée. Lana looked up at him. Her eyes were swollen from crying. I thought the officials would hand you over to Warhawk. I thought I'd never see you again. Tyrell comforted her. I'm a member of the Empyrean Circle. They wouldn't hand me over that easily. They hugged for a while and broke apart when Lana regained control over her emotions. Tyrell, what are you going to do now? I'm going to ask my teacher how to resolve this issue. Okay, I'll come with you. That put Tyrell in a dilemma. Lana didn't know that his teacher used to be the Sovereign. He tried to decline as politely as he could. He doesn't like being around too many people. Lana accepted his explanation without question. She didn't want to get in the way of her boyfriend's work. Oh, really? I won't come with you then. I'll wait somewhere nearby. Tyrell was relieved when she didn't push the subject. Okay, it won't take long. Meanwhile, Stephen was at home, relaxing on the couch in the living room when he sneezed. He had a feeling that someone was thinking about him. Valeria looked away from the TV. Daddy, did you catch a cold? Ever since Stephen started cultivating the technique he'd learned from the priest, he'd rarely gotten sick. Catching a cold was next to impossible. Before Stephen could explain, Valeria had already jumped off the couch and jogged into the kitchen. She came back holding a cup of water in both hands. Daddy, drink some water. Stephen suddenly felt like a father in his prime, experiencing a sense of accomplishment from watching his daughter grow up. The odd feeling he'd gotten before was thrown to the back of his mind. He took a glass of water from Valeria and patted her head. They settled back onto the couch and resumed their movie. At some point, Valeria had gotten bored and started playing with her toys. Stephen glanced at his watch an hour later. Valeria, Daddy's going to prepare dinner. Valeria was engrossed with her toys. She glanced up briefly and said, okay, before going back to what she was doing. Stephen patted her head again and went to the kitchen. Just as he was reaching for the apron, the doorbell rang. He thought Kim was home from work early, so he opened the door without asking who it was. He didn't expect to see Tyrell standing on the doorstep. What are you doing here? Tyrell had arranged for Lana to stay at a hotel before coming to Stephen's house. On the way here, he'd simulated numerous conversations to ask for his advice, but the moment he saw him, his mind went blank. Tyrell took a minute to organize his words. Just as he was about to speak, Stephen interrupted him. Come in and talk. Stephen opened the door and let him into the house. He pointed at the shoe rack beside him, gesturing for Tyrell to take off his shoes. Tyrell hurriedly changed into guest slippers and followed Stephen into the hall. "Why are you here?" Stephen asked, taking a seat on the couch. Tyrell knelt on one knee. "Mr. Adams, please teach me." Stephen frowned. "Keep your voice down." Tyrell immediately lowered his voice. Victoria heard the commotion and peered over the railing upstairs. "Who is it?" "My friend," Stephen said. "He's here to visit me." "Okay, I won't bother you. Have a nice chat." When Victoria went back into her room and closed the door behind her, Stephen turned back to Tyrell. "What do you want me to teach you? Have you reached a bottleneck in your martial arts? Or is there a problem with your cultivation?" Tyrell was a student, and he had a responsibility to guide him if he'd encountered an issue with his martial arts' progression. Tyrell hesitated. He had no idea how to bring up his predicament to his teacher. He took a deep breath and steeled himself. "Mr. Adams, I've been framed. I came to ask for your advice." Stephen stood up and turned around. "You can leave." Tyrell had expected this reaction. He tried again. "Please help me." "Do you still remember what I told you during our last training?" Tyrell didn't dare to reply. Of course he did. "I've dealt with forces from overseas many times before. I've reminded you constantly not to let your guard down. You told me that because the country has the Sovereign and the Empyrean Circle, no one would provoke us. Now you're here because you got caught up in the very scheme you insisted wouldn't happen." Tyrell lowered his head. "I know it's my fault. I feel guilty for my oversight. That's why I'm here to ask for your guidance." "I've retired. The safety of the country is not something an ordinary person is responsible for. If this is all you have to say, then please leave." Tyrell stood up when Stephen didn't say anything else. He knew Stephen was angry. He wouldn't be able to persuade him today, so he decided to give him some time to calm down and come back another day. Tyrell stood up and said his goodbyes respectfully. He walked to the door, put on his shoes, and was about to reach for the doorknob when the door swung open. Kim was outside, eyes wide in surprise. Stephen heard the sound of the door opening and turned around. He smiled when he saw Kim. "You're home. Have a seat. I'll prepare dinner right now." Tyrell stepped to the side to make way for Kim to pass. He hadn't hidden his face, so she recognized him with one glance. She was stunned when Stephen didn't pay him any mind. Shouldn't he at least walk Tyrell to the door if he was leaving? Kim recalled the time when Kylan's students came to kick Stephen out of the country. What if Tyrell was also here to cause trouble for him? The Wyvern Group and the Tanith Corporation were powerful companies, and she was a member of the Fallon family with a high status, but the military was out of their league. It had only been a year since their lives went back on track. Were they going to be separated again? Stephen noticed Kim's concern and called out to Tyrell. "Weren't you leaving?" Tyrell hurried out of the house before Kim had a chance to question him. She grabbed Stephen's shoulders and looked him over. "Why was he here? Did he hurt you?" "No, nothing happened. Valeria's in the living room. Wait with her while I prepare dinner." Stephen took her hand and led her out of the hall. Kim didn't move. She tugged on his hand and pulled him back. "Don't avoid my question. He's from the military. We have to be careful. Tell me what happened." Stephen sighed. "He used to work for me. He came by to ask me for some advice." "Really?" Kim asked skeptically. Stephen took out his phone. "It's true. If you don't believe me, want to give him a call? You can ask him." Kim rushed to stop him. "We shouldn't bother him with trivial things like this. Is it really okay for you to act so casual with him?" "It's fine. We're friends. It's getting late. Aren't you hungry? Let's go have dinner." Kim was reassured and let Stephen take her to the living room. Tyrell went back to the hotel where Lana was waiting for him. She ran over when he opened the door. "How did it go? What did your teacher say?" Tyrell shook his head. "He asked me to leave." "Isn't he your teacher?" Lana grumbled. "Why would he chase you out?" "Mind your words," Tyrell said sternly. Lana hung her head. "Sorry." Tyrell's expression softened. It's my fault. My teacher is skilled and knowledgeable. He taught me martial arts and a lot of other useful skills. I know how much he wants to stay out of our country's problems, and during our last training, he warned me to never let my guard down against the countries overseas. But I was too full of myself and didn't listen to him. I should have taken precautions when I came across the plane crash in the jungle. My teacher is probably disappointed in me. When he's not angry anymore, I'll try looking for him again. You were careless, Tyrell, Lana chided. No wonder your teacher's angry. But if he still won't help you, what are you going to do then? Tyrell didn't respond. He didn't know either. Preston and his team arrived at the conference room at the 5-star hotel early the next morning. They were wearing suits and exuded a serious demeanor. The Leviathan unit had gathered elite negotiators around the country to assist Preston. They were the most luxurious lineup in the country's history of diplomacy. Preston observed his team members. Don't forget our goal. We're here to buy time. Every minute we gain is another minute closer to clearing Mr. Tyrell's name. Our mission is imperative. We can't fail. His team responded in unison. Soon, Brent walked into the room with his subordinates from the side door. The room was decorated with expensive crystal lamps and chairs crafted from 10-year-old mahogany. Everyone's identification cards were made from natural crystals of the highest purity. Brent and Preston's identity plates were embedded with an additional golden border to emphasize their positions. The negotiators began when everyone was seated. Preston took a deep breath and introduced himself. Brent was not as polite and got straight to the point. What is there to talk about? Hand over the murderer and I'll consider this matter settled. The current evidence is not enough to prove that Mr. Tyrell is the culprit, Preston replied. As a member of the Empyrean Circle, he is a pillar of this country. We cannot hand him over without sufficient evidence. The video is the evidence, Brent countered. If he's not the culprit, then who is? The video does not explicitly show Mr. Tyrell taking Mr. Adler's life. According to our investigation, Mr. Adler's death occurred 3 hours before Mr. Tyrell arrived at the scene. He cannot be the culprit. How do we know for sure he didn't kill my son and return 3 hours later? That is your speculation. It cannot be considered conclusive evidence. You think your country's all that so you can say whatever you want? According to my family's judgment, the video is sufficient evidence to prove that Tyrell Fallon killed my son. Brent picked up a document and looked it over before continuing. Furthermore, your country's officials have admitted that the man in the video is Tyrell Fallon himself. What else is there to say? Preston glanced at his team. They shared the same thought. The officials had made a statement confirming Tyrell's identity in the video for clarification purposes back then. Who would have thought that Brent would use their own statement against them in the negotiations? 3 hours before Mr. Adler's death occurred, Mr. Tyrell was not in the jungle. He was training at the military base nearby. The soldiers are witnesses. The witnesses are all people of your country, Brent argued. Why should I believe them? How do I know for certain they're not faking their testimonies? My son was killed, and if the culprit is not caught, he'll never be able to rest in peace. Preston's words were stuck in his throat. The current evidence wasn't enough to implicate Tyrell, but it was a fact that Adler had been killed on the country's territory. And before they had a chance to release a statement, the video had circulated overseas. In this aspect, the U.S. was at fault for concealing Adler's death. Brent stood up, looking disappointed. The U.S. doesn't seem to be interested in negotiating, so I'll be heading back. The delegation team from Warhawk prepared to follow him out. Preston hurriedly tried to stop him. If the negotiations fell through, the U.S. and Warhawk could go to war. Please wait a minute. Brent turned around. What else do you have to say? His tone was calm, but his words were laced with anger. We hope you can give us some time to catch the real culprit, Preston said. Give you time? Will you be catching the culprit, or will you be making up a new lie and finding a scapegoat? Preston picked up a random document on his desk and pretended to scan the page as he racked his brain for an excuse. No, we've found conclusive evidence. The culprit will be caught soon. Brent didn't believe him in the least. Is that so? Preston gritted his teeth. 5 days. Give us 5 days to find the culprit. Silence filled the room. After a long while, Brent spoke. 3 days. I'll give you 3 days to give me a satisfactory explanation. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. Without waiting for Preston's reply, he left the meeting room with Warhawk's representatives. Preston leaned back in his chair and loosened his tie. He'd almost failed the negotiations. The U.S. and Warhawk had almost gone to war, and the world had almost been destroyed. Fortunately, Brent had agreed to give them 3 days. Preston wiped the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. "Sir, are you all right?" a member of his team asked in concern. He stuffed the handkerchief back in his pocket. "I'm fine." "But aren't 3 days too short?" another team member asked. "It can't be helped," Preston said. "We tried our best. We have to leave the rest to the officials." A mellow voice with a hint of guilt sounded at the door. "I apologize for causing you so much trouble." It was Tyrell, dressed in his white uniform. He gave off an imposing aura, but he looked dejected. Preston and his team were startled to see him and stood up. "Mr. Tyrell, why would you say that?" "I caused this mess, so I'll take responsibility. I won't run away. You all did well. I have some business to attend to, so I'll be leaving first." Preston and his team respectfully said goodbye as he turned to leave. Last night, Tyrell had told Lana that he'd be leaving Washington, D.C. and going to Annapolis in case the negotiations didn't go as planned. He'd caused this predicament, so he had to take responsibility. As Tyrell was heading to the conference room to monitor the negotiations, he'd noticed that one of Brent's subordinates hadn't followed him into the room. The subordinate's behavior was suspicious, so he followed him from the shadows. But before he could find out where the man was going, he was discovered. "Tyrell Fallon, right? You're a member of the Empyrean Circle. Can you come with me for a brief chat?" The man pointed to a corner at the end of the hallway. It was a blind spot outside the range of the security cameras. Tyrell's eyes narrowed. The man had recognized him right away, and he also knew where the blind spots at the hotel were. He couldn't be an ordinary person. The man turned around with a smile. "I'm Odin. You should have heard of me before." Tyrell thought his name sounded familiar, but he couldn't remember where he'd heard it from. "Are you from the U.S.? Looks like I overestimated the Leviathan unit. Let me introduce myself. I'm the leader of Vindictus." Tyrell narrowed his eyes. He cautiously placed his hand on his weapon. Odin tracked his movements. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. The security cameras caught us walking over here together. I'm Brent's subordinate. Are you sure it's a good idea to kill me here?" Odin took a step forward and spread his arms fearlessly, as if daring him to make a move. Tyrell lowered his hand and eyed Odin warily. "Leader of Vindictus, why did you lure me here?" Vindictus was a longtime enemy of the U.S. Both sides had fought several times and had a deep-seated hatred for each other. The Leviathan unit had the upper hand, but they hadn't been able to completely wipe them out. The leader of Vindictus was mysterious and hard to track down. The only thing they knew about him was his code name, Odin. His real identity remained a mystery. Even the Leviathan unit's intelligence personnel couldn't find any information on him after conducting an extensive investigation. Tyrell never expected Odin to reveal himself in the heart of the country. This proved that he was confident that he wouldn't be caught. Odin's smile was unnerving. "Don't be nervous. I'm just here to talk and exchange secrets." "I have nothing to talk to you about," Tyrell said. "Once you leave the hotel, I'll report you to the higher-ups. You'd better be prepared for the consequences." Odin had been right about one thing. He was Brent's subordinate. If he were killed, a war between the U.S. and Warhawk would be unavoidable. Tyrell had to avoid that at all costs. Odin wasn't fazed by his threats. "Are you sure you want to report me, Mr. Tyrell? Come to think of it, I met an interesting lady recently. I think her name was Lana Chevalier. Her parents are alive and she has a younger brother." Tyrell's expression changed. He grabbed Odin's collar and slammed him into the wall. "What did you do to Lana? If you hurt her, I'll kill you right here, right now." Odin had no reaction on the surface, But he was a bit shaken by Tyrell's speed. He hadn't even seen him move before he was pinned to the wall. But Odin had the upper hand. The family was always a weakness he could take advantage of. He kept a smile on his face. "Calm down, we haven't done anything yet. But if you don't cooperate, that might change." Tyrell loosened his grip, glaring daggers at Odin. "What do you want?" Odin calmly fixed his tie. "Do you want to join Vindictus? You meet the qualifications." "Dream on," Tyrell spat. Odin shrugged. "Didn't hurt to try. Anything is possible. By the way, Adler Robinson's real murderer is standing right in front of you." Tyrell was dumbfounded. How did that make any sense? Why would Brett bring the culprit who murdered his son to the negotiations? Was he not aware? Odin confirmed his suspicions. "Brent doesn't know I'm the culprit. I'm the one who's scheming against your country." Tyrell drew his blade and swung, stopping an inch away from Odin's neck. "You framed me and made the higher-ups lose their trust in me." "Do you want me dead?" "It's useless, even if you reveal the truth now. The whole world thinks you killed Adler. There's no way for you to prove your innocence." His words made Tyrell hesitate. Odin smirked. "If you kill me now, that will only prove that you're the murderer. You'll never be able to clear your name. Do you want to live the life of a sinner?" Tyrell's eyes flashed with determination. He pressed his blade into Odin's neck, drawing blood. "Sacrificing my life for the country will be worth it if I can eliminate Vindictus's leader." Odin's confidence wavered. He'd gone overboard. He didn't think Tyrell would be this hard to threaten. "Think about your fiancée. My people are beside her. If I die, she'll be buried with me. Are you okay with that?" Tyrell was resolved to sacrifice himself for the country, but Lana was innocent. How could he harm his fiancée? He was caught in a dilemma. On one hand, he had a responsibility to protect the country, but on the other, his fiancée was in danger because of him. "What do you want?" Tyrell asked through clenched teeth. Odin broke into a grin. "Tell me who the sovereign is." "I don't know." "That's a lie. I know the Empyrean Circle are direct subordinates of the sovereign. I want to know his true identity." "Is that all you want?" "Yes, that's all. I just want a name." Tyrell gave Odin a warning look. "After I tell you, instruct your people to leave Lana alone. Don't target her again." Odin knew that he'd pushed him to his limit. If he crossed the line, Tyrell would kill him, fiancé be damned. "Okay, you have my word." Tyrell was silent for a long while. In his heart, he apologized to Stephen, the country, and the people he'd sworn to protect. "The sovereign is Stephen Adams," he said quietly, "the former commander-in-chief." Odin's smile that he'd been maintaining all this time vanished. "What did you say? Stephen Adams?" Tyrell stared at him with a cold expression. He didn't answer. Odin raised his hands in surrender. "All right, I understand. When I leave the hotel, I'll ask my subordinates to leave your fiancé alone." "You'd better do as you say. If not, I'll hunt you down to the ends of the earth and torture you until you die." Tyrell's tone was low and threatening. He lowered his blade. "You should leave. If you stick around, even I don't know what I'll do. I might kill you on the spot." "Thank you, Mr. Tyrell. Goodbye." Odin disappeared into the darkness. "Damn it!" Tyrell punched a hole through the wall. "When this is over, I'll definitely kill you." It took him a while to calm down. When he regained his composure, he went to the conference room. While Brent was busy with negotiations, Odin took the opportunity to leave the hotel. He took a few turns down the alleyways before arriving at a residential area to rendezvous with his subordinates. When Odin pushed open the door to the temporary hideout, he saw Gwen, Luther, Reeve, and Blaine playing cards. When Luther saw him walk in the door, he tossed the cards onto the table. "The boss is back. I'm not playing anymore." Reeve also threw his cards onto the table. "You're just scared of losing." Luther scowled at him and changed the subject. "How did it go, boss?" Gwen noticed that Odin wasn't in a good mood. "Was it a failure?" "In my opinion, he succeeded," Blaine said. "Of course I succeeded. I just never saw it coming." Odin closed the door and sat at the head of the table. He casually swept the pile of cards to the floor. Who do you think the sovereign is? Some of us have fought him already, more than once. The four of them shared a confused look. Reeve was impatient. Don't keep us guessing. Once I find out who he is, Blaine and I will dispose of him. No one can survive after exchanging blows with us. If we kill him, the U.S. will be turned upside down. Whoever he is, the sovereign isn't that easy to kill, Luther retorted. How else could he have survived Cadis? Reeve scoffed, but he couldn't refute it, so he kept quiet. Odin pressed his hands on the table and put an end to the argument. That's enough. I called you here to discuss countermeasures, not to fight with each other. If you want to argue, then get the hell out of here. Luther gave Reeve a meaningful look. Boss, calm down. We were just messing around. We're all allies here. We have a common enemy. Why would we cause any internal strife? Don't let this happen again, Odin warned. Understood, Luther and Reeve replied. Let's get down to business. I found out who the sovereign is from Tyrell Fallon. It's Stephen Adams, the former commander. Gwen and Luther's jaws dropped. They thought back to everything that had happened in the past. Why had Stephen and the sovereign gone abroad at the same time? Why had they run into the sovereign every time they went to make trouble for Stephen? And why had the sovereign protected Stephen so much? The answer was that Stephen and the sovereign were one and the same. So it's him, Reeve muttered. I was annoyed when I found out he was disabled because I couldn't take my revenge. I'll never forget what he did. Blaine got to his feet and motioned for Reeve to get up. We know where he lives. Let's go kill him right now. Reeve and Blaine were part of the alliance of 40 countries that invaded the U.S. back then. They were the only few who'd survived. They saw the battle as a humiliation and began to practice the dark arts for the sake of getting back at the commander. When they heard that he was disabled after a duel with Kylan, they'd lost control and slaughtered a random village they came across to vent their frustrations. The Leviathan unit had gone to investigate when they discovered the incident, and that was around the same time when Vito made his reappearance, so they'd set the issue aside. Odin sat back in his chair and regarded them calmly. I know you two have a deep grudge against the commander, but who here doesn't have a grudge against the U.S.? That's precisely why we've banded together and formed Vindictus. Getting ahead of ourselves will ruin everything we've done so far. At his words, Reeve and Blaine snapped out of it and regained their composure. Reeve was the first to admit his mistake. You're right, boss. I was too excited. Blaine said nothing. He sat back down and folded his hands on his lap. When it's time for us to take revenge, you can do whatever you want, Odin said. I won't stop you, but right now we need to discuss how to deal with Stephen. Luther raised his hand. I've analyzed his battles. In the beginning, he wasn't as strong as he is now. The war with the Alliance, Devil Hall's comeback, his duel with Kylan, and the battle in Cadis. He survived every time he encountered a life-and-death situation. There's only one reason this was possible. The martial arts that Stephen cultivates are unique and one of a kind. The existence of a unique martial arts technique that allowed its user to get stronger with every life-and-death situation they encountered had never crossed Odin's mind. If we force Stephen to hand over this technique, our organization will be invincible, Gwen suggested. Let's do it, Odin said decisively. I need to meet up with Brent. You four, monitor Stephen and his family. Understood, boss, they replied. Odin went back to the hotel and found Brent and his subordinates in the presidential suite. I followed the plan and gave them 3 days to pressure them, Brent said with a smile. Odin took a seat across from him. Great. I have good news of my own. Brent leaned back in his chair, gesturing for him to elaborate. I used Mr. Adler's intelligence network that he set up before he passed and discovered the Sovereign's true identity. You know who he is? Brent asked in surprise. The Sovereign's identity was top secret. If he got his hands on that information, he could secure his position in Warhawk. Brent's grief over Adler's death was long forgotten as he thought of his endless prospects. Odin had predicted this reaction. Yes, the Sovereign is the former Commander-in-Chief, Stephen Adams. So it was him all along. How can we use this information to our advantage? All we have to do is force the officials to hand over the Sovereign. It's in their best interest if they give him up, because it'll resolve the tension between our two countries. And if they refuse, we can just use this information to suppress their country's international position and benefit your status and the Robinson family. Brent nodded. But what does this have to do with the Sovereign's identity? Whether we know who he is or not doesn't affect the plan. They didn't want to give up Tyrell Fallon, so they won't hand over the Sovereign either, Odin explained. But we're going to force them. They won't give in, so at that time, we'll take a step back and ask the former commander's cultivation technique. That's when they'll suspect that we know the Sovereign's identity. They won't be able to figure out how we found out, but to ensure that his identity remains a secret and resolve this issue peacefully, they'll pressure him into giving up his technique. What's the benefit of having this technique? Brent asked, puzzled. Based on my organization's analysis of Stephen's career as the commander and the Sovereign, he overcame every dangerous obstacle that would have normally killed an ordinary martial artist. The only reason he survived was because of the unique martial arts technique he cultivates. Understanding dawned on Brent. So what you mean is... That's right, Odin confirmed. We can use this technique to create an army on par with Stephen. Even if the US has the Sovereign and the Empyrean Circle, none of them will be a match for Warhawk. Our country will secure its position as ranked first in the world, and you will be the person who made that happen. You have the qualifications to fight for the position of head of the Robinson family. Brent was convinced. Okay, I'll inform the delegation team to hold another round of negotiations with the US representatives. Odin stopped him when he was about to tell his subordinate to call everyone over. What's wrong? Brent asked. Is there something else you'd like to say? No, I just wanted to let you know there's no need to be so impatient. Brent frowned. What are you trying to imply? Are you telling me what to do? Odin rushed to apologize. No, what I mean is, the US officials should be anxious, not us. We should wait until 3 days later. If we act like we're in a hurry to negotiate, they'll catch on that we know who the Sovereign is. Our previous preparations will be in vain. In reality, this was an excuse. The next 3 days were crucial for Vindictus to set up their plan. Brent's expression relaxed. I can wait 3 days. Seeing that he was on board, Odin took the chance and excused himself. I have matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave. Brent turned away in disinterest. Go ahead. 3 days later, the culprit still hadn't been caught. Brent and his subordinates attended another round of negotiations with Preston and his team. One of Preston's team members expressed his doubts after the negotiations. They're only asking for the former commander's cultivation technique. Isn't that too little compensation? I was wondering about that too, Preston said. During the negotiations, he had thought that Brent's conditions didn't come close to compensating for Adler's death. A martial arts technique wasn't that valuable, but it would be an easy trade to resolve the tension between the US and Warhawk. Preston had agreed immediately, but after the negotiations and thinking it over carefully, he felt like there was something off about their request. An elderly member of the team adjusted his glasses and looked up from the document he was reading. They're obsessed with this technique. There has to be a reason. Aren't you worrying too much? Another team member said. The Leviathan unit instructed us to buy time, and we accomplished the mission without giving Mr. Tyrell up. The rest has nothing to do with us. Preston let go of his doubts. That's true. Let them handle the rest. At the Leviathan unit's headquarters, the leader of the unit was listening to his subordinate's report. Mr. Preston had stalled for time, but when he hesitated, the leader prompted him. But what? Warhawk's representatives want the former commander's cultivation technique. What? Why do they want that? Mr. Preston and his team informed me that they don't know either. All right, I'll discuss this with the higher-ups. You may leave. After his subordinate vanished into the darkness, the leader called the higher-ups of the Leviathan unit into the room. The issue concerned the sovereign, so there was no time to waste. The seats in the conference room were filled in less than 2 minutes. A confidential document had been placed in front of each higher-up. They flipped open the document and scanned the report. Lance looked up in alarm. Why does Warhawk want the former commander's cultivation technique all of a sudden? Was his identity exposed? One of the higher-ups shook his head. No, the Sovereign's identity is top secret. Are you implying that there's a traitor among the Leviathan unit? Another higher-up defended Lance's argument. If they didn't know the Sovereign's identity, why would they make such a request? Someone else speculated. Everyone knows the former commander pulled us through the war with the Alliance. It's not strange for them to want his martial arts. Let's put that aside for now, Lance cut in. How should we respond to their request? Why don't we just give it up? A higher-up suggested. It's just a martial arts technique. How valuable could it be? Another higher-up argued. The Sovereign's martial arts are profound. His cultivation technique can't be ordinary. It's well known for those that chose to walk the martial path. Talent is a determining factor for success, while martial arts techniques come second. Going by that principle, the Sovereign's skill comes from his talent, not his martial arts. If we ask him for his cultivation technique, I don't think he'll refuse, because it's nothing special. As soon as these words were spoken, the room fell quiet as the higher-ups weighed the pros and cons. They seemed to have come to a silent agreement. After deliberating the best course of action for a long time, the Leviathan unit's leader spoke up. I don't feel good about this, but this is the only thing we can do for now. Sydney, I'll leave this to you. Also, ask the Special Task Force to find the culprit behind Adler's death and arrest him as soon as possible. A young man stood up and accepted his order. Meanwhile, Stephen was sitting on his electric scooter in front of the Sunshine Kindergarten. Valeria had reached the age where most children started school. A few days ago, Kim and Stephen had decided to send their daughter to kindergarten. Their wealth and assets were enough to find a tutor for Valeria so she could be homeschooled, but Stephen had said that learning how to interact with other children was an important aspect of childhood. He'd missed out on this opportunity back when he was young, and he didn't want Valeria to go through what he did. Kim agreed and supported his decision. They enrolled Valeria in Sunshine Kindergarten, the best kindergarten in Washington, D.C. Valeria had protested, but she lost to the temptation of delicious snacks and another trip to the amusement park. At 5 o'clock in the evening, the school bell rang, and the kindergartners' doors opened. A few teachers led a group of children through the gate. They chattered as they looked around for their parents. Stephen spotted his daughter as soon as she walked out. Valeria was wearing a hat and a white dress with a small backpack slung over her shoulders. She looked like a little princess. He waved and called out to her. Valeria lit up when she saw him and ran over. "Daddy, you're here!" Stephen took her backpack and placed it in the scooter's basket. "How was school today? Did you have fun?" Valeria put her hands on her hips with a proud look on her face. "I was on my best behavior. The teacher even gave me a flower." Stephen beamed and carried her in his arms. "My little girl is amazing." The parents nearby noticed them chatting and looked over. Valeria's white dress was from a luxury brand, and they wondered if she was from a rich family. They asked their children if they knew who her family was, but they lost interest when Valeria stepped onto the electric scooter. "I thought her family was rich. Her father works in delivery services." Her dress must be a knockoff. If it weren't for that scooter, I would have mistaken her for a rich kid. Why would the kindergarten let the daughter of a delivery boy be in the same class as my child? I have to get them to switch her to a different class. Valeria hugged Stephen's leg. "Daddy, they're making fun of you." "Don't listen to them. Daddy doesn't care what they say." Valeria nodded seriously. "You're much better than them." She tightened her arms around Stephen's waist. As he twisted the handle and sped down the street, he caught the last of the parents' gossip fading into the wind. "Better than us? She must be joking." "I have to tell my child to stay away from that girl in the future. She's a bad influence." When Stephen reached the residential area of their neighborhood, Valeria wanted to circle the block one more time. As they were walking back to the villa, they noticed a group of people in suits surrounding the gate. Valeria tugged on the hem of Stephen's shirt. "Why are all those people in front of our house?" He held her hand. "I don't know, but I'll take care of it." The group noticed them as they approached and started whispering amongst themselves. "Is that him? He's younger than I thought. He looks kind of ordinary. I was expecting someone more well-built. I've seen him before. That's him. He's the former commander-in-chief." "Who are you?" Stephen asked, walking up to them. "Why are you loitering in front of my house?" A man stepped forward and introduced himself. "Mr. Adams, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm a diplomat of the U.S. Please call me Preston. These are the members of my team." Stephen didn't know why they were here. After resigning from his position as the sovereign, he'd rarely paid attention to the country's affairs and spent all of his time on his family. "Why are you looking for me?" Preston gave him a rundown of the situation. "Therefore, we hope you can lend us your assistance and give us your cultivation technique for the benefit of the country." Stephen ignored them and asked Valeria to head inside without him. "Daddy, will you be okay by yourself?" she asked hesitantly. Stephen crouched down and patted her head. "It'll be fine, trust me." "Okay, I'll wait for you at home." Valeria slung her backpack over her shoulders and went into the house. Preston's team members were impatient. "Former Commander, we're busy people. Isn't it time for you to hand over your technique?" They were all here for the same mission, and they didn't want to stay for too long. Stephen didn't bother hiding his displeasure after Valeria went inside. "You want me to give you my cultivation technique? My answer is no, and there's no discussion." Preston and the team were taken aback. They hadn't expected Stephen to reject them. Their team had a high status, and even the highest-ranked diplomat, Preston, was present. Stephen wasn't the commander anymore, so they outranked him. Logically speaking, he should have agreed to their request without hesitation. Preston's expression darkened. He dropped all pretenses of formality. "Stephen, this is an important issue that concerns our country. How dare you refuse?" His team member added, "Brent Robinson and his delegation team are being too aggressive during the negotiations. You're the former commander. Why can't you contribute? It's just a martial arts technique. It won't make a difference. Why can't you understand that?" Stephen scoffed. "To think you represent our country and the officials trust you enough to negotiate with Warhawk when you're this easily swayed. Don't you know how to hold your ground?" His accusations angered the team. The bespectacled elderly team member gave him a stern warning. "Stephen, I'll let that go because I respect you as the former commander, but don't take it too far." "He's right," someone echoed. "As the former commander, it's your duty to step up when the country is in a crisis. If you step back when we need you, you're unworthy of that title. Don't be a coward and tarnish the commander-in-chief position." Stephen leveled the team with a hard look. His aura swept over them. Those who'd been speaking righteously snapped their mouths shut, as if a hand had wrapped around their throats. "What's the matter? Why'd you stop talking? Didn't you have more to say?" Stephen spoke calmly, but disdain laced his tone. When no one answered, he went on. "If you're done, then it's my turn. Let me ask you a question. Are you aware of our country's international position? We have the Sovereign and the Empyrean Circle on our side. We're not ranked first, but we're not that far behind Warhawk. By giving in to their demands, you've admitted defeat during the negotiations and put our country in a bad light. And now you're threatening a civilian. Do you think you're worthy of representing our country?" The team was outraged. Stephen's aura didn't have any effect on them anymore. The elderly member glowered at him. "Tyrell Fallon killed Adler Robinson. Our country is at fault. We agreed to their request for the sake of the country. Do you not understand the art of negotiation?" Another team member said, "Are you holding a grudge because your position was taken away from you? Is that why you're refusing to assist us? You should be ashamed of yourself." "I've done what I could for the country in the past few years. I've made countless sacrifices. What right do you have to raise your voice in front of me? Stephen scanned the crowd. His intense gaze made them shrink back. There was no anger in his tone, but it sent a chill down their spines. Preston maintained his composure. We're at fault here. It's only right we make sacrifices. This is obviously a scheme. If you were the pillar of a country, would you lead an investigation team to find the culprit after murdering an influential figure from another country? Warhawk released that video, which was clearly targeting Tyrell. You shouldn't trust what you see. You need to think for yourselves and see beyond the surface. The real culprit is still out there, and it's likely someone from Warhawk. The team rushed to defend themselves. We know that, but we don't have the evidence to prove it. We have no choice but to stall for time. So what? Stephen asked. Are you going to force a civilian to make sacrifices for the country? Get lost and don't come here again. He turned around and went inside the house, slamming the door shut behind him. The team was dumbfounded. What should we do? One member asked in concern. We have no choice, Preston said. Let's go back and report to Mr. Sidney. We'll see what he has to say. The team returned to the hotel and found Sidney tidying up his appearance. You're back? I'm about to pay a visit to the former commander. Come with me. The team looked at each other. Sidney was a higher-up of the Leviathan unit, and he was their superior. The elderly member of their team had suggested visiting the former commander without Sidney to resolve the issue early and give him a good impression of them. They'd originally thought that they'd be enough to get Stephen to hand over his technique for the country's benefit. That way, they could pacify Warhawk's representatives and gain the Leviathan unit's approval. Their career would be smooth sailing after that. Stephen's refusal had thrown a wrench in their plans, but that wasn't a big deal. With Sidney's status, he could easily make Stephen hand over the technique. Sidney noticed their odd expressions when he mentioned the former commander. He hoped they hadn't provoked him without him knowing. What's wrong? Preston recounted their meeting with Stephen, while his team filled in the details. Sidney's worst fears had come true. How dare you go behind my back and make a scene in front of Mr. Adams's house? Is this how you handle things? Preston and his team cowered from his anger. The elderly member's knees went weak. Sidney was worried that he wouldn't be able to accomplish his task today. Preston's team didn't know the Sovereign's true identity, but he did, and he knew that Stephen didn't tolerate that kind of behavior. He became angrier the more he thought about it. Come with me to Mr. Adams's house and apologize immediately. The team quickly followed Sidney out of the hotel. A member of the team lowered his voice and asked Preston, "Why is he so angry? Stephen's just the former commander." Before Preston could answer, the elderly member interrupted. "I don't think he cares about Stephen. He's just angry we did this without informing him first, and he thinks our way of handling the issue was inappropriate." Preston agreed. "We screwed up such a simple task. It's understandable that Mr. Sidney's upset. We have to do better the second time around." When Stephen returned home, he found his mother waiting for him in the living room. "Are you all right?" Victoria asked worriedly. "I'm fine. I asked the security guards to kick them out." Victoria was relieved to hear that. "Valeria's waiting for you in the bedroom. She was worried about you. You should go see her." "Okay." Stephen headed upstairs to the bedroom. Valeria was sitting on the floor, playing with a stuffed animal absent-mindedly. "Valeria, why are you sitting on the floor?" He picked her up and carried her in his arms. Valeria raised her head and stared at him. "Daddy, were those people here to cause trouble for you?" Stephen gave her a reassuring smile. "Yes, but there's nothing to be afraid of." Valeria nodded. "My daddy isn't afraid of anyone." "That's right. So let's not tell Mommy about this, okay?" She tilted her head in confusion. "Why not?" "Daddy doesn't want Mommy to worry." When Valeria heard that this was for Kim's sake, she didn't hesitate to agree to keep it a secret. Kim came home from work an hour later. Stephen, Valeria, and Victoria didn't say a word about the earlier incident as they gathered around the dining table for dinner. They were engrossed in conversation when the doorbell suddenly rang. Stephen got up. I'll go see who it is. Eat without me. Kim put some more food on her plate. Okay. Victoria remembered what had happened earlier that day and was about to say something when Stephen shook his head. He opened the door and went outside. The same group from earlier was back again. Stephen pointed to a park nearby. Let's talk over there. He didn't wait for them to respond before walking away. Sydney swallowed his words and fell into step behind him. Preston's team didn't know why their superior was entertaining Stephen's demands, but they followed him anyway. When they reached the park, Stephen took a seat on a bench and glared at Preston's team. I told you to get lost and never come back. Didn't you hear me? Sydney quickly stepped in to mediate. Mr. Adams, my subordinates were at fault. I brought them here to apologize. He whirled around and faced Preston's team with a stern expression. Stop standing there in a daze. Kneel. Preston and his team were hesitant to get down on one knee in front of the former commander, but Sydney's intimidating gaze pressured them into doing as he demanded. Every member of the team kneeled and apologized. Sydney bent down and lowered his voice. Mr. Adams, could you please overlook their behavior from earlier? Preston's team couldn't hear their conversation, but they could guess what he was saying. Stephen didn't answer, so Sydney didn't continue and stepped back. Preston's team was beginning to realize the gravity of their mistake. Their superior was being unusually respectful to the former commander. There had to be something they didn't know. His entire team had treated Stephen like a joke. If he made a big deal out of it, they'd be finished. It was summer, and the days were getting hotter. It was cooler at night, but the temperature was still considerably high. The team didn't feel the heat. A chill had permeated the air. After a long silence, Stephen replied, All right, I'll let this go for the Leviathan unit. Preston's team was relieved. Just as they were about to get up, he went on. I'm sorry, but I can't give you my technique. Please leave. Mr. Adams, please lend us your assistance, Sydney said hurriedly. I've retired from all my positions. You don't have to address me so formally anymore. When I retired, I already told you that I wouldn't get involved in the country's affairs. The Leviathan unit promised that they would take care of everything. His words echoed through the deserted park. Sydney didn't know what to say. When Stephen resigned, the Leviathan unit had promised that they wouldn't disturb his retirement. But it had only been a year, and they were already coming to him for help because of the pressure from the overseas forces. They'd gone back on their promise. Mr. Adams, I'm not asking for your help with nothing in return, Sydney explained carefully. My boss said if you help us, we'll open the treasury and let you choose any martial arts technique you desire as compensation. Please think it over. Stephen gave Sydney a thoughtful look. The Leviathan unit was being exceptionally generous. The United States Treasury was top secret. No one knew where it was located except for the higher-ups of the Leviathan unit. It contained the country's treasures that had been passed down for thousands of years. The treasury's value was comparable to half of the country's wealth and 1/10 of the palace's wealth. Allowing a civilian to select a martial arts technique from the treasury was an unprecedented opportunity. However, Stephen's technique was priceless. It was more valuable than any martial arts technique in the world. The priest had taught him the technique and hadn't prohibited him from teaching anyone else, but it was only right for him to keep it a secret. When Stephen had paid a visit to the candidates selected to join the Armored Cavalry Battalion, he'd only taught them a superficial breathing technique. It was far from the core of the technique that the priest had taught him, but even that had greatly increased their strength. If Warhawk's representatives wanted this technique so badly, they must have found out his true identity. Demanding for the former commander to hand over his technique wouldn't be worth the effort, but it would be a different story if they knew he was the sovereign. Stephen looked up at Preston's team, who was still kneeling, and sighed. Get up. With his approval, Preston's team stood up one after another. Mr. Adams, are you agreeing? Sydney said expectantly. No, I'm not. My cultivation technique is unique. Even the most valuable martial arts in the treasury can't make up for it. On another note, Has the Leviathan unit considered investigating certain suspicious points? For example, why would Warhawk's delegation team ask for my technique all of a sudden? Do you know the reason? A sense of shame washed over Sydney and Preston's team. Stephen's questions were valid. They had thought it was suspicious, but because of the time limit, they didn't have the luxury to conduct an investigation. Until you have your answers and a clear picture of the situation, continuing this discussion is pointless, Stephen said. If there's nothing else, please leave. As a higher-up of the Leviathan unit, Sydney knew that once Stephen had made his decision, no one would be able to change his mind. He respectfully said goodbye to Stephen and led Preston's team away. Stephen watched them leave before turning to head back to the villa. As he was walking out of the park, he spotted a woman hiding behind a tree in the distance. She noticed him looking in her direction and went up to him. Stephen smiled sheepishly. Kim, why are you here? Kim tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. You were gone for a while and the food was getting cold, so I came out to get you. Who were you talking to? Stephen didn't want her to worry, so he gave her a vague answer. No one in particular. We used to work together, and they came by to reminisce about the old days. You're lying. I saw what happened. They weren't here for a friendly chat. Stephen was at a loss when she called him out. He didn't know where to begin. Seeing that he wasn't saying anything, Kim continued. I recognize one of them. He's the highest-ranked diplomat in our country. I saw him on TV before. He should be busy with negotiations with Warhawk's representatives. He shouldn't have any time to spare, but he came to find you. She looked him in the eye. Stephen, tell me the truth. Are they here to make you take the blame? Stephen was stunned. He'd been bracing himself for questions about his identity, but he wasn't expecting this. When he still didn't respond, Kim was even more convinced that she was right. In the past, Stephen had been accused of treason and kicked out of the country. He managed to clear his name and returned safely. After that, Ron had forced him to take his son's place in the vanguard. In the end, Stephen was the only one who came back alive. He wasn't the commander anymore, but it seemed like he was in danger all the time. She'd been constantly worried about him whenever he was away for long periods of time. Some nights, she would lie awake in bed, wondering where he was and what he was doing. But she couldn't let her concerns show, because she had to stay strong for her daughter and her mother-in-law. After experiencing those incidents more than once, Kim had grown sensitive to these situations. She'd noticed Valeria and Victoria acting strangely at the dinner table, and she knew that something had happened. She'd questioned them after Stephen left the house. When she found out that a group of people had made a scene in front of their house earlier that day, she'd rushed outside, because she was worried that Stephen would leave with them. Tears welled up in Kim's eyes. Stephen, don't take the blame, okay? I don't want you to leave. Stephen realized that she'd misunderstood and pulled her into a hug. It's not what you think. Kim buried her face in his chest, not quite believing it. Really? Really, I'm not lying. When Kim calmed down, she pulled back and looked up at him. Tell me the truth. Why were they here? They wanted me to give them my martial arts technique, Stephen said honestly. It would have been compensation for Warhawk's representatives. I heard it was their request. I didn't agree to it, though. Kim frowned. Why are our country's officials like this? It's fine, I kicked them out. They won't be bothering us anymore. Stephen took her hand. Let's go back. We've been gone for a while. Mom and Valeria are probably getting worried. At the hotel, Sydney sat on the couch with a contemplative look on his face. Preston's team stood off to the side, waiting for him to speak. When he didn't, Preston gathered his courage and asked, Mr. Sydney, what do you make of this? Sydney scowled. You're still calling me that? Pretty soon we won't be superior and subordinate anymore. We're about to lose our jobs. The Leviathan unit gave me this task. They wanted me to ask Mr. Adams for his technique, but you went to his house without reporting to me and provoked him. Just where did you get the courage to act like you're above him? Preston's team stared at the floor. They'd made a huge mistake. "Isn't Stephen just the former commander?" the elderly member asked. His voice was quiet, but everyone in the room heard his question clearly. Sydney was not pleased with this question. Stephen was the sovereign, and he stood shoulder to shoulder with the supreme leader. He possessed absolute authority, and he was the highest pillar of the country. Sydney wanted to tell Preston's team all this to make them understand just who they defended, but the sovereign's identity had to be kept confidential. "Mr. Adams is the former commander. That alone should be enough for you to understand. He served our country several times. He deserves unconditional respect. I'm a higher-up of the Leviathan unit, but even I treat him with respect. How dare you disrespect him behind my back?" Sydney's fury swept across the room. Preston's team didn't respond and kept their eyes on the floor. The elderly member shrank back in fear. Preston mustered up his courage again. "Mr. Sydney, please calm down. What should we do about this? Warhawk's delegation team is waiting for our reply." Sydney massaged his temple. Warhawk's representatives probably won't be leaving until they got what they wanted. This was turning into an even bigger headache than it was before. "Go back to your rooms. I'll report this to the Leviathan unit." Preston's team filed out of the room. When Sydney was alone, he dialed the Leviathan unit's private number and reported this to the leader. At the Leviathan unit's headquarters, the higher-ups were having another meeting. "Shouldn't Stephen know when to step up when he's needed?" Lance demanded. The higher-ups who had suggested having Stephen hand over the technique because it probably wasn't valuable were embarrassed by this turn of events. "This concerns our country's safety. There should be consequences for his actions." "Why don't we send him to the confinement room like we did back then?" another higher-up said. There was a pause. Then his suggestion was met with fierce backlash from the other higher-ups. "We can't do that. Have you forgotten what happened? Mr. Adams has done his best for the country. Confining him is not appropriate." The leader gave the higher-up who'd made this ridiculous suggestion a cold look. "Don't mention this again. Mr. Adams has done a lot for the country. It's us who let him down. Do you understand?" The higher-ups quickly stood up and nodded. The leader's tension eased at his reaction. It's not strange for Mr. Adams to not want to give up his cultivation technique. We shouldn't make a big deal out of it. We should respect his decision and look for an alternative. We could give Warhawk's representatives a martial arts technique from the Treasury instead. The higher-up who had suggested confining Stephen for refusing to hand over his techniques stood up again. "Boss, we can't give up any martial arts techniques in the Treasury. They're priceless treasures. If they're replicated overseas, any martial artist could have the potential to reach the Grandmaster realm or higher. We won't stand a chance against Warhawk." The others in the room shared the same concerns. Seeing that most of them agreed with him, the higher-up continued. "As we discussed before, a martial artist's potential is heavily dependent on their talent, and not necessarily on their martial arts. Given how skilled Mr. Adams is, he must be practicing a nameless technique. There's no harm in handing it over. And he won't be giving it up for free. He'll have the opportunity to select a new technique in the Treasury. Isn't this what we agreed on?" "That's correct," Lance said. "But that's not a solution to our current situation. We need to figure out how to placate Warhawk's representatives." The higher-ups glanced at him. "Let me finish. Because Mr. Adams is cultivating a nameless technique, it won't matter if we hand it over. All we need to do is forge a similar technique and give that to Warhawk. There's no need to reveal our treasury." The leader shook his head. "I've already thought about that. But do you really think Warhawk's representatives are going to believe that Mr. Adams is cultivating a nameless technique?" The higher-ups had nothing to say. He hadn't thought that far ahead. No one spoke, so the leader gave his instructions. "Find someone to select a martial arts technique from the Treasury and inform Preston's team to make preparations for another negotiation. Dismissed." The higher-ups dispersed at his command. "Do you have what we asked for?" Brent asked during the next round of negotiations. Preston's team didn't respond. Brent had expected this. It wouldn't be that easy to make the sovereign give up his cultivation technique. He pretended he wasn't aware. Is it really that hard to fulfill such a simple condition? I apologize, but the former commander did not agree. The Leviathan unit has offered another cultivation technique as a replacement. Preston gestured to his team member, who got up and held out a box to Brent. It was made of gold and inlaid with gems. One could tell it was very valuable with one glance. If even the box was so precious, one could only imagine what was inside. Brent did not accept the box. He folded his arms across his chest. I told you before, what I want is the former commander's cultivation technique. I don't want a replacement. Preston motioned for his team member to return to his seat. He'd already predicted that today's negotiations wouldn't go smoothly. I apologize, but we are unable to fulfill your request. Please change your conditions. Brent propped his legs up on the table, not caring about his disrespectful behavior. Then please tell Tyrell Fallon or the Sovereign to come back with us to Warhawk. Preston was getting frustrated. Was Brent messing around? This was an even more impossible request. We won't be able to fulfill this condition either. Please make a different request. Brent sneered and stood up. You can't do this and you can't do that. It looks like you have no intention of negotiating. Then be prepared for conflict. He left the conference room with his subordinates. Preston's team were left in low spirits. We failed. What should we do now? A team member asked. Preston sighed. We have no choice but to report this to the Leviathan unit. What's the matter? Did the negotiations fall through? Preston's team hurriedly stood up and greeted the new arrival. Mr. Tyrell, what brings you here? Tyrell smiled and gestured for everyone to relax. Tell me what happened. Maybe I can help you. Preston's team wasted no time and spilled their grievances. Someone pushed the blame onto Stephen. This is all Stephen's fault. He refused to give up his cultivation technique. That's why we're in this mess. When Tyrell frowned, everyone thought he was displeased with Stephen, so they continued to shift the blame. Warhawk's representatives agreed to settle the issue if the former commander gave them his technique, but Stephen is prioritizing his personal feelings over the country and put us in a difficult position. He's jeopardizing the country's future. Mr. Tyrell, you have to teach him a lesson. The team thought that they'd finally found someone to back them up, so they vented their dissatisfaction and encouraged Tyrell to take action. Tyrell couldn't take their complaints anymore. That's enough, he shouted. He'd been in a bad mood since the recent turn of events, and hearing his respected teacher being mocked and ridiculed like this pushed him over the edge. The chattering members of the team immediately quieted down. Preston was delighted. It seemed like Tyrell was angry because Stephen had refused to give up his technique. Mr. Tyrell, this concerns the country's safety. We would like to ask for your assistance. Please help us persuade the former commander to accept Warhawk's request. After a long silence, Tyrell sighed and said, All right, I understand. I'll come with you if you want to talk to him again. Preston was thrilled. Tyrell was a member of the Empyrean Circle. With his presence, Stephen wouldn't be able to refuse. If this worked out, he could gain Tyrell's favor and maybe even have a shot at joining the Leviathan unit. As for Tyrell, he once again was feeling guilty for going against Stephen's wishes. We're in this predicament because of me. I'll only be accompanying you. The final decision will be up to the former commander. Preston walked up to him with a fawning look. I understand. When would you like to set off? The sooner the better, Tyrell said. I'll make arrangements right away. I'll be waiting at the security department. Call me when you're ready. With that, Tyrell left the conference room. The team gathered around Preston and complimented him. As expected of the highest-ranking diplomat in the country, you're the only one who could have gotten Mr. Tyrell to come with us. If he's around, Stephen will have no other choice but to give up his technique. We'll be relying on you when we get there. The flattery made Preston more confident. Of course, it's no problem. I'll take care of everything. He had his subordinate book a flight to Washington, D.C., and soon they were on their way to Stephen's house. At this time, Odin was in his hotel room. He turned on his communication device, and a man with a white horse mask appeared on the screen. "How's it going?" "Not too well," Reeve replied. "The target has a bodyguard around her. I've exchanged blows with him, but it won't be easy to take him down. I've had to retreat to prevent him from catching on to my identity. I don't think he knows about my affiliation with Vindictus. He most likely thinks I was there to assassinate his employer's family." "Our plan is riding on your success," Odin said. "You're not allowed to fail." "I understand. I'll do my best to complete my mission." "All right, please speed things up. Stephen will be occupied for the next few hours. There's no telling when this opportunity will come again." Reeve nodded, and then the screen turned dark. "Aren't you giving him too much pressure?" Luther asked. "It won't be easy for him to kidnap the Sovereign's family by himself." "That's where you're wrong," Blaine said with a grin. "Reeve's martial arts are similar to mine. There aren't too many people in the country who can match up to us. He's holding back because he doesn't want to catch Stephen's attention. He'll be busy for the next few hours, so it'll be the perfect chance for Reeve to make his move." When Odin nodded in agreement, Luther apologized for questioning Reeve's abilities. "Once Reeve succeeds, our revenge against the country will officially begin," Odin announced. His tone was neutral, but there were many underlying emotions. His subordinates were getting jittery at the thought of finally getting back to the country. They didn't bother hiding their hatred anymore. Odin ignored his excited subordinates and picked up the box on the table. He knew that pressuring Preston's team wouldn't be enough to make Stephen give up his technique, so he's devised a plan to force him. While Odin's subordinates had been monitoring Tyrell's fiancée, Lana Chevalier, he had instructed them to include the people around Stephen. Most of the surveillance had failed because of an unidentified group's interference, but a few of them had completed their mission. Odin had sent Reeve and Gwen to take over the job so that they could act at any time. They held back to avoid alerting Stephen and waited for the right opportunity to strike. The chance had come, and Odin was looking forward to his meeting with the Sovereign. Meanwhile, Tyrell and Preston's team had arrived in Washington, D.C. They were in a car heading to Stephen's villa. Preston's team had offered to lead the way, but Tyrell rejected their good intentions and volunteered to drive. He was Stephen's student. He knew this neighborhood better than anyone. This raised suspicions among the team. "Mr. Tyrell, are you familiar with this neighborhood?" When this question was voiced, the other team members spoke up. "Yeah, I was wondering the same thing. Mr. Tyrell, you didn't need us to show you the way. Have you visited the district before? Do you know Stephen personally?" Everyone's eyes fell on Preston, as if he had the answers. Preston felt uneasy when their gazes bore into his back. He pretended to be calm. "I don't believe he has. Mr. Tyrell is a member of the Fallon family, and they're currently stationed in the district. That must be why he's so familiar with this neighborhood." His explanation made everyone come to a sudden realization. So that's how it is. I was beginning to think the former commander had a connection with the Empyrean Circle. Tyrell glanced back, annoyed by the racket. Everyone in the back quieted down. No one made a sound. Tyrell turned around and focused on the road. He'd been worrying about what he would say once he saw Stephen. He was a student, but he had no right to change his decision. He was overstepping his boundaries by accompanying Preston's team. Stephen was the Sovereign, and the 10 members of the Empyrean Circle were his subordinates. He was the true leader of the aristocrats, and both his status and his influence were far more superior to the Imperial Circle. Tyrell was already on edge, and when he heard the team clamoring in the back seat, the noise had grated on his nerves, so he glared at them and put an end to their discussion.